When it comes to ripping off other toy lines, no one does it better than Lanard Toys. Let's take a look at them. Welcome back to the Junk Room, everybody. It's me, the Junkman, coming back at you with another video. And we're going to talk about the toy company, Lanard Toys. I hope I said that right. That's how the computer said it, so that's why I'm going to say Lanard Toys. This toy company has been around since 1978, but lately they've been catching the eye of collectors, mostly when they started making toys based on aliens, where they just took the molds from Kenner and repainted them. It made a lot of collectors scratch their heads when they walked into Walmart and was like, what is this generic looking aliens line that looks just like Kenner but painted brightly? And they started to pick up other licenses to bigger movies. They did Rampage, they did Kong Skull Island, Top Gun. They even picked up a line based on Predator. And who can forget a toy line based on the recent reboot movies of Jumanji? But like I said, Lanard Toys go way back to 1978, where they would always try to capture the sales based on someone else's hot toy line. Just go back a few years, let's look at Star Trooper. Now you're thinking this is probably a ripoff of Star Troopers, but no, this was their take at Halo action figures. But if you ask me, it looks like they also try to rip off a Star Trek Cardassian, because that looks like one of the Cardassians to me. And what about Atomic Ranger Warriors? I think the name right there tells you who they're ripping off. And as you can see here, they ripped off Power Rangers. Now as you can see, this toy company's had a habit of ripping off other toy companies. But they also had hits also, and their biggest has to be the Core. Started way back in 1986, and it kept going until 2018. This was a generic wannabe cheaper G.I. Joe line. Let's look at some more action figure lines that they ripped off. In 1985 they released Beamer Bears, which is clearly a ripoff of Care Bears. But a year before that, in 1984, they released Sumbo Hair Bears. Again, another ripoff of Care Bears. I've seen companies rip off other toy lines, but I've never seen a toy company with two different toy lines to rip off one toy line. Crazy. They even tried to get some of Kenner's sales in 1982, some of that girl dollars. While Kenner had Glamour Gals, Lanard Toys released Designer Dolls, a clear ripoff of Glamour Gals. And sometimes they just ripped off a movie that it wasn't even a toy line of. We all fell in love with Crocodile Dundee. Well, what did Lanard Toys give us? The Crocodile Dundee ripoff, Down Under. They couldn't even come up with a great name. I mean, come on. That took about 3 seconds for them to think of. In 1986, one of the hottest toys around was Madball. And believe it or not, they tried to rip off Madball by releasing Foul Ball. Get it? You get the joke? Foul Ball is foul because it's so nasty looking, but it's also foul like in a baseball. You get it. They also released that same year Trash Head Spitballs, which seemed to be a hybrid ripoff between Madballs and Garbage Pail Kids. This toy company had no shame. As they was ripping off Madballs in 1986, they was also trying to rip off G.I. Joe with a line of action figures called Gung Ho. This was just too close to G.I. Joe according to Hasbro, and they would sue Lanard Toys. I did a whole video about that lawsuit, but it looks like it didn't slow them down at all. But let's go back to 1981 where they ripped off Kenner. As Kenner was having success with a strawberry shortcake line, they released Jelly Bean. Again, a clear ripoff. In the 90s, there was nothing hotter in the toy aisles than Jurassic Park. And although they didn't technically maybe rip off Jurassic Park, they at least tried to rip off the name. When they released Jurassic Clash, it's clear they were trying to cash in on some grandparents that thought this was Jurassic Park, or some kids that couldn't afford the Kenner line. In 2016, they were still trying to rip off toy lines. As you can see here with the release of Fu Takeout, what I believe is a ripoff of Mortal Kombat. And what about that name, Fu Takeout? That's not very PC at all. By going back to 1984, they tried to rip off GoBots, and they wasn't even that creative with the name. When they released Robots, get it? Like Go Bots, but it's a row instead of a go. They just changed the G to an R. It was like they hired Letterman. Oh my God, who's going to get that joke? As you can see, Robots is a clear ripoff of GoBots. Now here's one I wasn't sure about. It was released in 1987, so it seems like to me they were trying to rip off Mask, but I could be wrong. You tell me. This is Landlord's Street Eaters. It doesn't sound anything like Mask. You think if it was a ripoff of the Mask line, they would have just changed the M to T and called it Task. so I'm not really sure how they came up with Street Eaters if it's a mask ripoff. Let me know what you think. Maybe they're trying to rip off something else. Now, I probably could keep going, but I'm going to stop it right there. When I looked up how many action figure lines this company's made, they've made around 35 or more. And I know, when you think Lanard Toys, it's not a name that you think of when you think of action figure lines. But like I said, in the last couple of years, they really became their own, getting major movie license from Aliens, Predators, Jumanji. I already talked about all that, but it's good to see that the company did hang in there, and at least now they're picking up some real license instead of trying to rip everybody else off. And there's probably smaller toy companies now trying to rip them off, and they're probably getting all upset about it. Anyway, that's a look at probably the toy company that's ripped off other toy companies more than anyone else, Lanard Toys. Now, I'll be honest with you, I knew some of these toy lines, but I never really heard the name or paid attention to them until they started doing the Alien line. Let me know what you think. Maybe you were a fan of this toy line all through the 80s. But that's a look at some of the rip-off lines they've done, and they also did some generic lines themselves that didn't seem really based on anything else. Well, let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, thumb up if you like my content, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk again soon.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.